Every person walking this earth is born with something divine written inside them. A code, a design, a pattern placed there by God himself. It's not something you see in the mirror, it's something you sense in your spirit. It's that quiet knowing that your life has purpose, that your existence carries meaning, that what's inside you is greater than what you've been through. But for most people, that inner code never gets fully activated because they spend their lives trying to gain approval from people who didn't design them. You see, the moment you start chasing validation, you step out of alignment, you step out of purpose. You hand the steering wheel of your destiny to the opinions of others. And when you do that, you silence the divine instruction God placed inside you. The world today is full of noise. Social media noise, cultural noise, comparison noise. Everyone is showing what they have, where they're going, what they're doing. And if you're not careful, you start to measure your worth by the yardstick of other people's achievements. You start to think, maybe I'm not enough because I don't have what they have. But listen, God didn't make you to copy anybody. You are an original design. You are a unique expression of divine intelligence. You are a one of one. The same God who spoke galaxies into existence breathed his spirit into you, not so you could live for the applause of others, but so you could live in alignment with your purpose. Transformation begins when you stop asking, what do they think of me? And start asking, what does God think of me? The first question will trap you. The second will free you. Because the moment you begin to live for approval, you start adjusting who you are to fit what others want. You edit your dreams, you silence your voice, you dilute your power just to be accepted. But the truth is, the crowd can never validate what it didn't create. People's approval is temporary, but divine alignment is eternal. Outer approval will make you perform. Inner alignment will make you transform. When you're performing for others, your energy is fragmented. You're trying to please, to prove, to protect your image. But when you're aligned with your purpose, your energy is focused. You don't waste time defending who you are. You spend it becoming who you're meant to be. And that shift, that moment when you stop chasing and start aligning, that's what I call a spiritual DNA shift. It's when your inner world begins to evolve at a cellular level, your thoughts start to change, your emotions start to heal, your vision starts to clear, you begin to operate from faith, not fear, from peace, not pressure, from purpose, not performance. You see, every action you take flows from an inner belief system. If your belief system is built on fear, fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of failure, your actions will always be reactive. You'll be controlled by circumstances instead of conviction. But when your belief system is rooted in alignment with God's word, with your values, with your calling, your actions become intentional, powerful, and consistent. That's why the Bible says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Notice it doesn't say by the changing of your circumstances. It says by the renewing of your mind. Because the true battlefield is inside you. When you renew your thoughts, you reprogram your spiritual DNA. And when your DNA shifts, your destiny shifts. Let me tell you this, your mind is the gatekeeper of your life. Whatever you allow into your thoughts will eventually show up in your reality. If you keep feeding on comparison, you'll always feel less than. If you keep chasing approval, you'll always feel empty. But if you feed your mind with truth, with gratitude, with faith, your spirit begins to awaken. You start to move differently. You speak differently. You think differently. That's inner alignment. That's when your thoughts, emotions, and actions start flowing in the same direction as God's intention for you. You're no longer scattered by other people's opinions. You're centered in purpose. You stop asking for permission to be who you are, and you start giving yourself permission to evolve. But here's the truth. Alignment is not always comfortable, because the moment you start focusing inward, everything that's been blocking your growth starts to surface. Old wounds, old patterns, old fears, they all come up for healing. That's not punishment, that's purification. God brings to light whatever you need to release so you can rise higher. Sometimes that process will cost you relationships. Some people won't understand your growth. They liked you better when you were shrinking to fit their comfort zone. But listen, You cannot carry everyone into your next season. When God is shifting your DNA, he's also refining your circle. Not everyone who started with you is meant to finish with you. Some people are assignments, not alignments. Don't be afraid to walk alone for a while, because solitude is where alignment is built. The noise fades, the clarity comes. You start hearing God's voice again, not through filters, not through distractions, but directly in your spirit. That's when you realize that everything you were looking for externally, peace, confidence, validation, was already inside you, waiting to be activated. Think of a seed. When a seed is planted, it disappears into the soil. It's dark, it's quiet, it's hidden. But that hidden stage is where transformation happens. The seed doesn't need applause, it doesn't need validation. It just stays rooted, aligned with its purpose, and allows the divine process to do its work. One day, what was buried breaks through. It becomes visible, it grows, it blooms, it bears fruit. That's your life. Your inner alignment is your soil, and your focus is your sunlight. When you stay consistent in the dark seasons, when you keep nurturing your mindset, your heart, and your faith, something begins to shift inside you. You might not see it immediately, but trust me, your spiritual DNA is changing. God is coding new strength, new wisdom, new grace into your spirit. There will come a time when what's been happening in secret becomes visible in your results. People will look at you and say, "You've changed," and they'll be right. But it wasn't a surface change. It was a structural change. You didn't just upgrade your habits, you upgraded your identity. That's what alignment does, and it doesn't add something new. It activates what's already been there. God doesn't give you your destiny after you prove yourself. He placed it inside you before you were born. The process of alignment is simply you catching up to what God already saw in you. And to catch up to that vision, you have to stop running after everyone else's approval. You can't hear divine direction if you're tuned to human opinions. Every time you check your worth against others, you distort your spiritual frequency. It's like trying to hear God on a static channel. But when you quiet the noise and focus inward, the signal becomes clear. You start recognizing divine instruction in everyday life, in conversations, in challenges, in silence. When you're aligned, even setbacks start to serve your growth, because you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" You realize that God uses delay to develop discipline, and he uses difficulty to build depth. You stop resisting the process and start trusting it. That's when peace enters your life, not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer divided within yourself. You're no longer fighting who you are. You're no longer trying to prove your worth. You're simply living from a place of wholeness. That's inner alignment, when your inner world and outer world are in agreement. And that agreement has power. When your inner energy is clean, when your thoughts, emotions, and intentions are pure, you start attracting experiences that match that frequency. You'll notice doors opening effortlessly. Opportunities will find you. The right people will appear. Not because you're chasing them, but because you're becoming the kind of person who naturally aligns with them. It's not magic, it's spiritual law. The law of alignment says that your outer life mirrors your inner life. So if you want better results, stop trying to fix the outside and start renewing the inside. Focus on your heart, your habits, your healing, your faith. Let your inner world be your priority. Remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't serve from a scattered soul. The more you align with God, the more power flows through you. The more you know who you are, the less you need others to tell you. The more you focus on purpose, the less you worry about approval. Because here's the truth. Alignment will cost you popularity, but it will give you peace. It will cost you validation, but it will give you vision. It will cost you comfort, but it will give you clarity. And once you taste that peace, that vision, that clarity, you'll never go back. So today I want to challenge you. Stop outsourcing your confidence. Stop waiting for someone to recognize you, to choose you, to approve of you. You've already been chosen. You've already been approved by the one who created you. When you truly grasp that, you stop competing and start creating. You stop comparing and start becoming. You stop striving and start flowing. And that's the essence of this DNA shift in process. It's when you realize that everything external, the success, the relationships, the recognition, will align naturally once your internal world is in order. Seek first the kingdom within you, and all these things will be added unto you. Your alignment is your assignment. God is not asking you to do everything. He's asking you to become something, to become whole, grounded, faithful, authentic, to walk in truth, not image, to serve in love, not ego, to live from your spirit, not your insecurities. When you live like that, life begins to respond differently. You'll find favor where there used to be resistance. You'll find flow where there used to be frustration, because now you're not pushing against the current, you're moving with divine timing. So stop worrying about who's watching, who's clapping, who's criticizing. Focus on who you're becoming. Every day you wake up and choose growth, healing, and faith. You're rewriting your spiritual DNA. You're stepping into alignment. You're moving closer to the version of you that God saw when He designed you. And one day when you look back, you'll realize that the people you were trying to impress have faded from your memory, but the person you became, that's eternal. That's legacy, that's transformation. So breathe, trust the process, focus on your alignment, and let God handle the outcome. Because the moment you stop chasing outer approval and start living in inner alignment, that's when heaven begins to move on your behalf. Your DNA shift is already in process. Stay aligned, stay faithful, and watch what God does next. There comes a point in every believer's journey where effort meets faith, where you've done everything you can, said every prayer you know, taken every step you were told to take, and yet things still don't seem to move the way you expected. It's in that in-between space that your faith is tested most deeply, because that's the place where control ends and trust begins. That's where surrender becomes the door to your next dimension. You see, the world teaches us to hustle, to grind, to plan, to push, to never stop until we make it happen. But the kingdom operates differently. In God's order, obedience always comes before outcome. He never asked you to control the results. He asked you to be faithful with what's in your hands. Your responsibility is obedience. The outcome is His. Most of us get weary not because of what God asked us to do, but because we try to do what only God can do. We try to force timing. We try to manipulate outcomes. We try to open doors that God hasn't unlocked yet. We want to know every detail before we take a step, but that's not faith. That's fear disguised as control. Faith says, God, I trust you even when I can't trace you. I'll move with what I have, even if I can't see what's next. And that, right there, is where the DNA shift begins. Because true transformation doesn't happen when you get what you want. It happens when you learn to release what you can't control. Something powerful happens inside you when you surrender outcomes to God. Your spirit relaxes, your heart opens, and your mind begins to rewire itself from anxiety to assurance. You start to live from a place of peace instead of pressure. Let me say this plainly. Surrender is not giving up. It's giving over. It's not weakness. It's wisdom. It's the recognition that the one who created the universe might know a little more about your path than you do. It's realizing that your story has already been written. You're just walking out the chapters. When you stop trying to write the ending yourself, you give God room to surprise you. You give Him space to do what you couldn't imagine, to bring blessings you didn't expect, and to use even your disappointments as raw material for destiny. But the only way He can do that is if you take your hands off the outcome and let Him drive. Some of you have been frustrated because you think your faith isn't working. But the truth is, your faith isn't meant to work like control. It's meant to work like trust. You don't use faith to force something to happen. You use faith to stay at peace while God makes it happen. Faith isn't about manipulating the outcome. It's about maintaining belief in the one who controls the outcome. The Bible says, be still and know that I am God. It doesn't say be busy. It doesn't say be anxious. It says be still, because when you're still, you can finally hear Him. When you're still, you allow divine order to unfold. When you're still, your inner world stops vibrating with fear and starts resonating with faith. Stillness doesn't mean inactivity. It means intentional calm, the kind that comes from knowing that the outcome isn't your burden to bear. It's choosing to rest in the truth that if God brought you to it, He's already made a way through it. You have to remember this. God is not just working on your goals, He's working on your growth. Sometimes He'll delay a blessing not because He's denying you, but because He's developing you. If He gave it too soon, it would overwhelm you instead of elevate you. That's why surrender is the highest form of faith. It says, God, even if it doesn't happen the way I imagined, I trust that what you have is better. That's when real peace enters your heart. Not when everything goes according to plan, but when you finally stop needing it to. Let's be honest, most of us love control because control makes us feel safe. It gives us the illusion that we can predict and protect our future, but control is an illusion, one that keeps you tired, anxious, and spiritually disconnected. You can plan your steps, but you cannot dictate divine timing. When you release control, something begins to shift at the level of your spiritual DNA. You start to move differently. You begin to think from a higher frequency, from faith instead of fear, from trust instead of tension. That's the DNA shift in process. Control comes from ego. Surrender comes from spirit. Ego says, I'll make it happen. Spirit says, God will make it happen through me. The ego wants certainty. The spirit walks in faith. The ego demands the outcome. The spirit rests in obedience. When your spirit becomes stronger than your ego, your whole reality begins to change. Because now you're not driven by results. You're driven by revelation. You're not motivated by applause. You're moved by alignment. You stop asking, how long will it take? And start saying, however long it takes, I'll stay faithful. That's when God starts moving in ways that don't make sense. That's when resources show up that you didn't plan for. That's when doors open that you didn't knock on, because now your faith is creating flow. You've let go of control and you've made space for miracles. The problem with many of us is that we're trying to build God-sized outcomes with human-sized understanding. We're trying to make sense of things that can only be revealed through spiritual surrender. But faith is not logical, it's relational. It's trusting that God's logic is higher than yours. It's believing that even when the plan doesn't make sense, the planner still does. You see, when God delays something, it's not because He's forgotten, it's because He's preparing alignment. He's orchestrating unseen details. He's moving hearts, shifting situations, setting up divine appointments you don't even know about. Your obedience activates the process, but your surrender allows the process to complete. That's why so many people get stuck halfway. They start in faith but stop in frustration. They pray, they plan, they prepare, but when it doesn't go their way, they panic. They let impatience replace trust. They start thinking maybe God forgot, maybe they missed it, maybe they need to take control again. And the moment you take back control, you interrupt the miracle. You can't pray for God to lead you and then grab the wheel when the road gets rough. You can't ask for divine order and then insist on your own timeline. Surrender means trusting the process even when it feels slow, confusing, or uncomfortable. It's easy to trust when things are clear. Real faith is tested in the fog. When you can't see the next step, but you take it anyway. When you can't predict the outcome, but you keep walking. That's when your spiritual DNA begins to change, because surrender builds spiritual strength. It teaches you to operate from peace instead of panic, from flow instead of force. Every time you surrender a situation to God, you strengthen your faith muscle. You rewire your mind to depend on divine timing instead of human deadlines. You start to understand that God's not yet is not no. It's I'm working something better. Think about it. Some of the best things that ever happened to you came after something you thought was the worst. The closed door that broke your heart was actually protection. The delay that frustrated you was actually preparation. The detour that confused you was actually direction. God never wastes a moment, but He does require your trust. And that's the hardest part for most of us, trusting the invisible, but that's where real power lives. Faith is not believing in what you see, it's believing in what you know, deep in your spirit, even when your eyes can't confirm it. It's that quiet confidence that says, God, I don't know how, but I know you. When you live from that posture, you stop striving and start flowing. You stop forcing and start receiving. You stop rushing and start resting. That's the difference between a life of stress and a life of surrender. And make no mistake, surrender is active. It's not sitting back doing nothing. It's working with excellence while releasing attachment to the outcome. It's praying with expectation, not desperation. It's showing up every day, doing your best and saying, God, I trust you with the rest. That's when supernatural peace begins to cover you. That's when your energy changes. You're no longer vibrating with fear because you know the author of your story is still writing. You start walking lighter, speaking calmer, living freer, because now you're not controlled by outcomes, you're anchored in obedience. Obedience says, I'll do my part. Trust says, God will do his. And together, those two create miracles. The moment you stop trying to force results is the moment results start to flow, because surrender puts you back in alignment with divine order. There's a scripture that says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. Notice, it doesn't say he might direct your path, it says he will. That's a promise. But the condition is clear. You have to trust him with all your heart, not half, not when it's easy, not when you understand, but fully, completely. And that's where most people fall short, partial trust. We trust God with the small things, but not the big ones. We trust him with our Sundays, but not our Monday decisions. But full trust, total surrender, is where divine acceleration happens. When you finally let go, things start falling into place almost effortlessly. What used to be hard becomes natural. What used to be confusing becomes clear. What used to drain you now sustains you, because now your faith isn't fighting the flow, it's riding it. The DNA shift in process is this: moving from fear-driven control to faith-driven trust. It's no longer about managing outcomes, it's about mastering peace. It's no longer about forcing timing, it's about following purpose. You begin to understand that life is not happening to you, it's happening through you. God is using every experience to shape your character, stretch your capacity, and strengthen your faith. Every delay, every disappointment, every detour, they're all divine tools, sculpting you into the version of yourself that can carry the weight of your destiny. When you finally surrender, you enter a higher level of spiritual maturity. You stop begging for outcomes and start thanking God for the process. You stop worrying about when, how, and who, and start resting in why, because you trust him. That's when true peace arrives, the peace that surpasses understanding. Not because everything is perfect, but because your spirit is. Not because life is easy, but because your heart is steady. So today, take a deep breath. You've prayed, you've prepared, you've persevered. Now release the outcome. Trust that God is orchestrating details you can't see, aligning opportunities you can't imagine, and writing a story that's far better than the one you planned. You've done your part. Now let God do his. And as you do, remember this: the surrender you resist is the breakthrough you've been praying for. Let go and watch your DNA shift. Let go and watch your peace return. Let go and watch God reveal what he's been building in silence. Because when faith replaces control, miracles become inevitable. The outcome was never yours to hold. It's always been in his hands. Trust that and rest. Your DNA shift is already in progress.